after Team Penske's drivers were punished for violating the push-to-pass rules during the entity IndyCar season opener in St. Pete. 4 members of the team have been suspended. As you see in this statement from Team Penske on the screen, Team Penske completed an internal review after a full and comprehensive analysis of the information from St. Pete. They've determined that there were significant failures in their processes and internal communications, and as a result, Joseph Newgarden's race engineer Luke Mason, Will Power's senior data engineer Robbie Atkinson will be suspended for the next 2 IndyCar races, which does include the Indianapolis 500. Additionally, managing director Ron Rosinski and team president Team Cindric were also suspended for the same 2 races. All the graphics in this section are courtesy of Team Penske. As you can see, Roger Penske has made a statement saying, "I recognize the magnitude of what occurred and the impact it continues to have on the sport to which I've dedicated so many decades. Everyone at Team Penske, along with our fans and business partners, should know that I apologize for the errors that were made and I deeply regret them." Well, Ben, starting with you, with these 4 sidelined for the month of May, should the rest of the paddock feel confident about the self-accountability from Team Penske and believe they have actually taken this matter very seriously?
Well, they better. I don't know if they should, but they definitely better. Guys, I mean, I don't even know where to begin because this is a very tough one because you can go back onto my YouTube channel 4.5 years ago when I was, in college at the Scout Radio booth, and a couple of my friends, Liam Carroll and Chase Strauss, invited me onto their sports show. It wasn't even on my motorsports radio show. It was their sports and politics show. They wanted to talk about Roger Penske buying the IndyCar series in Indianapolis Motor Speedway because it was that big of a story. And I said at the time that there is not a single person on the planet more qualified to make this purchase than Roger Penske is. And here we are 4.5 years later, and I feel like all the optimism, everything that we were feeling in terms of the positive momentum that he was going to bring to the series and take it to the next level and kind of revive a series that had still been struggling to find its identity ever since reunification. At that point, even over a decade prior to his purchase, it just hasn't materialized. And this is just the latest example of things that I think are not a good look, and something that I think was the one reservation and the one concern that I had when he made this purchase. There was a team on the IndyCar Series grid called Team Penske. Now, I know it's not the same entity in every way, shape, or form as Penske Entertainment is. I know that Roger said in his racer interview that he wasn't even in the country when this whole thing initially broke. So, I mean, I understand that the situation's slightly different there, but the reality is his name is still attached to the race team and to the series that it competes in. And, the team owners that have met with him since this all happened, I hope that they've gotten some answers. I hope that they've asked some tough questions. And I don't want to pin this all entirely on him, but I feel like when you look at the state of the series, Roger Penske for a long time, I think, has been all talk, no action when it comes to a lot of different issues in IndyCar. We've heard that we need to do this better. We need to raise our efforts over here. We need to up our marketing and get more people involved in getting people interested in this series. We need a third engine supplier to come in. I mean, heck, you've got to hang on to your second engine supplier before we can worry about that right now. We need to add more ovals to the schedule. I understand we got Milwaukee coming back, and you can't just flip a switch and change the schedule overnight, but it's been a few years now. We've gotten that consistent message, and we've hardly seen any change to the schedule in that regard as well. And that's still considered a weak point for a lot of people, losing Texas this year. So I think when you look at all those things, all those different things I just laid out, and more that I'm probably forgetting that aren't coming to mind right now, you look at a situation like this. I don't know that Roger Penske has nearly as much of a benefit of a doubt as he would have had, say, if this happened 3 or 4 years ago. It's a difficult situation. It's one that I don't think, you can really make a good comparison here. I mean, it would be like if Robert Kraft owned the NFL and then, the Patriots have their Spygate or Deflategate controversies, or it would be like if Rob Manfred was the owner of the Houston Astros and then their whole cheating scandal blew up. I mean, it's already a bad enough look for the sport that one of your top teams, one of your championship caliber teams is involved in a situation like this. But then you couple that with the fact that the guy that owns the team also owns the series. It's just a very difficult situation to find yourself in if you're involved in IndyCar right now. So to answer the question, should the rest of the paddock feel confident about the self-accountability that Penske's taken here? I don't know if I were in that situation, if I would be, but I feel like I would have to be, because at the end of the day, it's just a very, very difficult situation to try to work through. And I don't know how else you can feel confident about the series going forward if you don't at least publicly come out and say that, we're confident that Penske's done the right thing here and managed his team and managed his organization to take accountability for their actions and their shortcomings.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there, Ben. Good evening, everybody. It's been what a tumultuous, 5 months almost into the year for Penske of ups and downs, winning races, but Daytonas and the World Endurance Championship races, and of course St. Pete before it got taken away from them, and now all of this spiral going on in the last couple of weeks. Just real for IndyCar and for the upcoming month of May, really does put a bit of a sour taste going into that, because this has all happened now. If this had happened later down the track, maybe somewhere in July or August, essentially it might not be getting so much traction, but it is a big story. They've done their due diligence even, and they've made the sufficient changes that they need to be made. Now, how that's going to affect them on track over the next few weeks, of course, starting off with the Grand Prix on Saturday, is yet to be seen. Interesting that the number 3 team, who of course had their result affected at St. Pete by what's happened, has not lost any members of its core group, which is interesting. We'll get to that in a minute. But going forward, if you're, to bring back on one of Ben's points that he made there, if you're one of the smaller teams perhaps, or the midfield teams, say, you want to make sure that your processes and you're dotting every I and dotting every T now, because if this has happened to the big dogs at Penske, part of that whole conglomerate group that owns the championship and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and everything else, you do not want to be getting caught out here and losing people for a couple of races, because you feel like if this was to happen again to another team, it could be an even harsher penalty against them. So I feel like it's kind of run its course, hopefully, and we can get on to talking back about racing and cars on track again over the next couple of weeks. A thing that IndyCar has not had, let's be honest, in the first 4 months of the year, which is cars on track and stories about cars on track. So let's get back to racing, and that's what IndyCar needs to do, and bring all the positivity that we can do going into the next couple of weeks at Indianapolis.
So Tim Cindric has had a statement out as well. He says, for Ron and I as leaders of this team, it's not about what we did, it's about what we didn't do. It is our responsibility to provide the team and our drivers with the right processes to ensure something like this can't happen. For that, I apologize to Roger, our team, and everyone that supports us. Our number one job is to protect and enhance the reputation of our brand and that of those that support us. In that regard, as the overall leader, I failed, and I must raise my hand and be accountable with the others. This is a team, and in my position, it's the right thing to do. In a surprising interview, Roger Penske spoke to Marshall Pruett from Racer.com about the suspensions. We highly encourage you to check this out. The link is in the video description below. The captain provided answers to multiple hard-hitting questions, such as why Joseph Newgarden wasn't suspended, why members of Scott McLaughlin's team avoided a suspension, and why the team chose suspensions instead of firings, and in a more serious discussion as well. So this is going to run and run. But after reading what Roger Penske had to say about this whole situation, do you appreciate the fact that he sat down for a media interview to answer the questions as well. And also, what additional questions do you personally now have for Mr. Penske?
First of all, well done, Marshall Pruett. He is absolutely top of the line when it comes to getting everything IndyCar, and he'll be, of course, on site in Indianapolis for the next couple of weeks. Does this answer all the questions? I kind of think so. For the driver's point of view, I guess it's just a natural thing when you're in the car and the button is there, you've got to press it. That's the meme with the sweaty pressing of the button meme. You know the one I mean. It's a bit of that going on, and I kind of think it was a bit of a natural reaction to press the button. We know what obviously all the other drivers have said from the other teams, of course, too. But when it's switched on rather than it not being working, it's a bit like having DRS open on the first lap of the Grand Prix. It's there to be pressed. So there was never going to be any driver movement, I feel like, and that has come to pass. But a bit like I kind of said in the first part of the story, let's just hope now that this is all done and dusted and under the bridge. I personally have got nothing more really that I think needs to be added to this. In terms of the team thing, I know Ben's obviously made some points about the whole series thing, and we've talked about that for a while on this show and others, especially over the last couple of months. But from the team side, I think this is all done and dusted, and maybe Tim can go to Charlotte on Memorial Day weekend and support his son in the Coca-Cola 600 Austin. So that'll be if he turns up in the pit lane at Charlotte, do not be surprised as he's suspended from Indianapolis. But I'm sure he'll have a off-site potentially role to play, a bit like when soccer managers are touchline banned. They're either on the phone or in the stand. Being involved. So yeah, exactly right. So he'll be there and involved in some way, shape or form, and then it will all come back to normal the week after when we get to the Detroit street race.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know that I feel like I don't have any additional questions for Penske, and yet I feel like there's also a million different things that I could ask if I was given the opportunity. But as for this situation, I think, to Matt's point, it's probably best, that we try to, let it be for right now and focus on the month of May and the biggest race of the year, the biggest event of the year. But again, yeah, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, correct me if I've missed a part of a story here. I can't get over the fact that, to Matt's point about, being a driver and having to press the button, there's a reason why Will Power wasn't disqualified, right? Because Power didn't press the button. He had the opportunity to, but he didn't. McLaughlin and Newgarden did, and that's why they were disqualified. Power was just given a points penalty. So if that's the case, what I still want to know, what was it that Power knew that Newgarden and McLaughlin didn't, or what was it that McLaughlin and Newgarden didn't know that Power did? Like, you guys see what I'm saying there? Like, that's a disconnect that I can't quite reconcile with right now, because again, there's a ton of different layers and nuances to this, especially considering the ownership aspect of it. And I think this was probably the worst team that this could have happened to, given who also owns the series. But I mean, clearly Power had to have known something that his teammates didn't, right? Or he's got more integrity than they do. I mean, I don't know. They're just, I find it hard to believe that that's just a coincidence that, one of your drivers either didn't know that was an option, or knew that it was, but knew that it was illegal. And so he didn't press the button when given the opportunity, because a race car driver is always going to do everything that they can to gain an advantage over their competition. That's the one thing that I still struggle with. I'd like, and maybe we've gotten it. I must confess, it's possible that, all the news that's come out the last couple of weeks, maybe there was an explanation that I've missed. But that's the one thing that I still want some clarity on. What was it that Power knew that kept him from actually doing what Newgarden and McLaughlin did, which is why the penalties were a lot less harsh for the 12 team in terms of the championship than it was for the 2 and the 3 car.
But to that point, Will has now lost his chief engineer in Ron Rosowski as well, so he's lost out.
That's true
in that sense. Whereas, to my point before, McLaughlin obviously lost his third place. I think it was third, wasn't it, that he finished in the race? Then had the retirement at Long Beach, of course, bounced back at Barber with the win. But the 3 team is still together as their core group going into these next couple of weeks, and he's been getting better and better over the last couple of years at the 500. And now maybe there might be a bit of a focus shift, and McLaughlin could be the point of focus for Penske going forward. And of course, we know how Power struggled a couple of years ago and almost never made the race.
Well, but just one more thing, Matt, to your point there. And I read the interview that, again, Marshall Pruett did a fantastic job. Hats off to him for asking the tough questions that needed to be asked. And I don't doubt what Roger says, that, look, I haven't been on the pit box or the strategy box ever since, we bought the series, that how my race team is run, even though it's my name, it's a completely separate group from what I'm doing on the business side of things. Like, I get all of that. But how do the optics still look to somebody who doesn't know any better? A new fan or somebody just sees Penske and also sees Penske over here and sees that, the team's in the news because of these penalties and this controversy. And then what if, one of their cars wins the 500 later this month? I just,
my favorite casual fan.
Sure.
Thing. Someone that watches the 500 that just kind of tunes in and out of the series throughout the year is going to look at this and go, what? And
I was watching the 500 last year with some friends of mine who, again, I don't even know if they watch the 500 every year, but I wouldn't even call a casual fan, but, just happened to be on, and very minimal knowledge of the sport. And I mentioned, that they threw that controversial red flag, and who did it benefit? Joseph Newgarden. I know better. I'm not putting the tinfoil hat on, but I could understand where somebody could look at that if they don't have the knowledge that, they are separate groups there, and say, well, that seems a little fishy, doesn't it? So, I mean, again, it's a difficult position for Roger to be in, and I don't envy him, but I do think he needs to be incredibly careful with the words that he chooses and the message that he's sending to the audience, because if he's not, then it just leaves the door open for those conspiracy theories to run wild, which that's not a good situation for anybody in the sport.